Welcome to the CPM Customer Success Podcast, where we help Office of Finance leaders enable an exact solution to enhance their corporate performance without spending countless nights and weekends in the office. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Smetana with Nova Advisory. Nova Advisory is a 100% OneStream professional services diamond implementation partner. We help OneStream customers and prospective OneStream customers get the most out of their OneStream investments. And for CPM customer success listeners, we now have a weekly newsletter to keep you informed on the latest CPM customer success news. By subscribing today, we'll keep you informed on episode releases, including customer success stories, OneStream interviews, and capabilities to keep you up to date about OneStream's unified platform for finance. You can check that out now at Nova Advisory's website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success Podcast newsletter today. Today we have two special guests with us on CPM Customer Success, both of which you're going to see on the stage at this year's Splash Conference. And today's session is focused on the Women in Finance initiative that OneStream Software has launched. We've got Pam McIntyre, who's the Senior Vice President and Corporate Controller at OneStream Software. And we also have Susan Maron, a prior CPM Customer Success guest, so our listeners will be familiar with you. Susan, our Chief of Staff at Nova Advisory. Welcome both to the show.
Excited to be here.
Thanks,
Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. Splash is just around the corner. We'll be airing this episode just prior to this year's Splash, and you all have a chance to see and interact with Pam and Susan at the conference. Yeah, let's get into this. Women in Finance is an important topic to OneStream, to both yourself, Pam, and to you, Susan. It's important to Nova Advisory. We'll explain what's about this initiative and the background, but before I go there, let's start with just some background of yourself, Pam. Can you tell us about yourself, your role at OneStream, and really your career journey and how that took you into finance?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm really excited to be here and really excited for this year's Splash because there's a lot on the docket. So we're really excited. We call it Splash season here. So we're working really hard to bring all the content to all of our customers and prospects. But I've been at OneStream 5 years now. I actually started my career as an auditor. So I started as a continuation into my college education. Most people who are accountants go into an audit world at some point in time. So I worked in the audit function for quite a while at Ernst & Young. And I transitioned to industry and started kind of leading corporate finance roles. So I've been in FP&A, I've been closed consolidation, financial reporting, I've been head of financial reporting and accounting teams, and head of finance transformation teams as well. So I've gone through that journey. And at one point in time, I was an early adopter customer of OneStream back in 2015. And that's really when my love for OneStream grew and continued on my career in industry at a couple other companies, but joined OneStream about 5 years ago. When I started here, I recognized that there was a need for mentorship and development of the team. And that's one of the things that drove us to create that Women in OneStream group. So that actually cultivated our internal ERG. And then we framed the Women in Finance initiative off of that. So really been quite the journey. In the 5 years, we've grown this initiative immensely, and we're super excited to continue getting the support. And thank you to Nova Advisory for supporting us this year.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to. Susan, would you introduce yourself, please? Same question for you, your role at Nova Advisory and your career journey that led you into finance.
Yeah, Susan Maron, Chief of Staff at Nova Advisory, and I had many other careers in many other fields before I landed in finance. So that was just serendipity on my side. And I echo the excitement that Pam mentioned about Splash this year and what it means. And being on the stage for the Women in Finance launch is a wonderful opportunity. And I think for Nova, we have several women in our leadership roles within our own organization. And it's really nice to know that we are part of a community that supports that. And we want to offer that same network of support that we've been provided and have provided to others that we're lucky enough to have. A career path is more than just a solo journey, and being a leader almost always comes with a network of people and support that comes around you. So really excited about that.
Excited to hear more about what y'all have to say and offer in the conversation. So let's start with you, Pam. So the inspiration behind OneStream's Women in Finance initiative, you touched on it a bit in your background, but maybe you could talk more about how it aligns with OneStream's overall mission.
Yeah, so when I joined OneStream, as I mentioned, the team was young. They were working on developing their careers at the time. And what I recognized immediately was that I, through my career, had mentors that mentored me and that I still kept in touch with, but the team here was really young. And on top of it, there wasn't really an outside network of people that I could rely on besides my contacts that I had made throughout my career. OneStream has a ton of finance contacts. We have a ton of customers and prospects that come to us for advice, for guidance, for different feedback on things. And what an opportunity would it be for us to outreach to them to actually share different perspectives? Could that be career mentorship, just ideas, talking about challenges, talking about other things that come up to us throughout our careers, where I feel like in general, men have had that network forever, for a long time, but women really have not created that network, not created that outlet for people to have the discussion. And that's really what the initiative came about. In 2020, we had our first webinar, and we were shocked at the amount of people who participated. We thought maybe we would get 30 or 40 people, but we had over 100 people at our first webinar. Our largest webinar, we had over 1,000 people register and over 850 people live on the webinar, was our largest webinar. And then we realized there's really a lot behind this. People are looking to this as an opportunity, and the feedback we were getting live feed from people in the Q&A was how inspirational, or emails afterwards. And that's when we realized this was a really big impact and that we really wanted to continue investing in it as a company.
Terrific. That's a fantastic turnout. It's really eye-opening. I thought you were going to say 50 attendees, but wow, just blew your expectations away. So Susan, I would like for you to follow up, if you could, on why the Women in Finance initiative is important for both Nova Advisory and really for yourself as well.
Yep. Happy to. I do think that the sense of community and what Pam just touched on, in inspiration, is a really big part of what drives so many women that I know. And it helps to motivate us along our own career journeys. And the more you have, it's almost like this cyclical, positive role and cycle that we play for each other. And it feeds on the kind of forums that you're setting up at OneStream, Pam. To hear that you had 100 and then 1,000, it's because of that inspiration. And that's just a wonderful thing. So I do think that we at Nova want to support the inspirational aspect of what Pam and OneStream are trying to achieve. And for me personally, I'll tell you a story from many years ago when I was sitting at a table full of mixed gender colleagues at lunch. And we all ordered our food, and the colleague next to me, a male, looks at me and he says, "Hey, Susan, have you ever noticed that when men order food, they say, 'I'll have the soup.' And when women order food, they say, 'Could I have the soup?'" And I never thought of it. It never occurred to me. And I have thought about it ever since. At every lunch, at every dinner I've ever gone to at a restaurant, I listen to the difference between how men and women order. And it's not always, it's not absolute, but most women ask the question and most men make the statement. And I've thought about that a lot in the years that have followed. And I would translate that into, if women ask a question, they're leaving room for the answer to be no. And if men make a statement, it's much harder to say no because nobody's asking a question. They're just making a statement, an assumption, and moving forward. And if you apply that to the business world, and there's a job posting up for some important executive VP role, and a woman can choose before seeking her boss's input on this to go two ways. You can ask a question and say, "Hey, I see this VP role is posted. Do you think I should apply?" Or you can say, "I see the VP role is posted. I'm going to apply and here's my plan to do it." And those two things sound really amazingly different to a woman's ears. And to a man, they're like, "Of course you're going to apply. There is no question about that. Why are you asking the question?" And I think the point of me telling that story is I'd like to find more ways to encourage women to just make the statement and move forward and not ask the question.
A lot to unpack there. I love the story and the analogy. And I'm going to stop and listen now. Next time I have lunch and maybe at Splash, I'll be paying closer attention to that. But Pam, maybe you could kind of start commenting on the women in finance community. It's grown. There's clearly the need like you described. How is the initiative supporting professional growth and development for the folks that attend the webinars, that show up and support the initiative?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've really tried to do is bring up the topics people are afraid to talk about, like maternity leave or returning to work or balancing work and home. Those are all things people a lot of times are really afraid to have the discussion or ask questions about. But they're real. They're real, and they drive whether you're going to make a decision about taking a job further away from home because there's a balance and you have to get home for your kids, or taking a career or not taking a job, like taking a job versus a career. So all of those things are things that we've realized and recognized. That's the content people really are interested in. They're interested in career advancement. How do I get that next position and the support to get there? They're interested in understanding new technologies and how do I balance that with like keeping up with my daily work. So there's just different dynamics. And to Susan's point, some of them are just the dynamics of how a woman comes across asking a direct question versus a man. A woman can be seen as very aggressive or very like targeted in a way, but a man it's just natural to them to enter a room and ask a very direct question. My boss, Bill, he always talks about me being a good mediator because of the ability to balance two different things, to keep control of things, but also be empathetic and understanding and walk people through why something is right or wrong, where he's always just say no or just say this is why. So it's just a different dynamic of how women and men have evolved in their lives over lots of years in history. But being in business for women is not that long. If you think of like the longevity of careers and how long people have been working, women in business really is just at the beginning stages of life in theory. So how do we evolve in business and how do we bring different viewpoints? How do we bring different skills to the table? I always say we have all earned our seat at the table. We're all here for a reason. Our resumes show it, our experience shows it, but what we deliver at the table and what we can actually bring to a business can be very different from person to person. But you never should question why you have a seat at the table. And that's what we're trying to get across to the people who are interested. And that's what we've seen people continue resonating with, really those topics that are just not normal conversations or just maybe uncomfortable to start a conversation about.
So in addition to having the seat at the table and not questioning that, what are some other key challenges that women in finance face today, and how are you approaching and trying to address those challenges?
Yeah, women in finance and women in business in general face the challenge of the assertiveness. Finance is a very right and wrong career. There's a right answer, there's a wrong answer, especially in the accounting world. So really navigating through that as a business partner, adding the human to the nature of what we do. I think that's where women are going to be super successful in the upcoming years because really the role of finance has evolved. It's not just a record keeper anymore. It's really, truly a business partner. You have to understand a lot of different dynamics of what's going on in the world and what's going on in your role. So this women in finance and that struggle, I think there's going to be a lot more skills that women are going to be ready for because that business partnership, that evolution, the ability to pivot, this might seem weird, but women can hold a lot of balls in the air at once. You're doing laundry, you're answering the kids, you're returning a work email at the same time. It's just part of the DNA of a woman to be able to balance a lot of balls in the air. It's just how we were built. That doesn't say anything negative about a man. It's just a skill that women were naturally built with to be able to juggle a lot of balls. And I think that is a lot of the dynamics of what the world is expecting of finance today. And that's why this focus on women in finance, the future of it, and the opportunity for people to really get more comfortable and to get more courage to move forward in their careers instead of being nervous about taking the next step, really breaking the glass and being like, I'm the person that can do these things and I can add value and do it all at once.
Susan, curious if any challenges come to mind or things that that Pam touched on and inspired you, or questions you might have?
Yeah, when I think about the challenges, it's more than just finance. I think the challenges, to Pam's point, are about women in business, as that is new. I never thought of it from that perspective, so that's interesting, Pam. But hearing you talk about the newness of it gives me different thought process here. I'll say that from my perspective on overall business, not necessarily finance, there's this double bind for women of deciding when to speak up and not to speak up. I read a study from Yale that's probably a little bit dated at this point, but it was something about how when men speak in a meeting, the longer they speak, the more competent they are perceived. And for women, it's the exact opposite. The longer women speak, the less competent they are perceived. And so back to the double bind, what's the right answer? If a woman speaks more, she's at risk of being less competent. But if she speaks less, it might be inadequate to tackling the business conversation. So that feels like a problem that doesn't have a great solution just yet. And maybe people are changing. It is a dated study, and maybe there is a need to do a different study or to just talk about it more. Like Pam said, the forums to talk about the difficult things are important. And maybe if everybody's just aware of that, people will change their perspective.
Fascinating study. I'm continuing to be surprised, and my mind's expanding and thinking about these situations myself. I'm curious. So Pam, you recently did a panel webinar with the Women in Finance Initiative, and you touched on a couple topics that I'm curious if you could expand on. One was just the general talent crunch in the finance industry, and maybe you could comment, or if you have thoughts about how women play a role in kind of addressing that talent crunch.
Yeah, I think at one point in time, women felt like they had to leave the workforce to be able to raise a family. And I think that balance, the ability to have more of a flexible working arrangement, being able to leverage technology, all of those things that will help us be more efficient will help bridge that gap. But it needs to be open and a continuous conversation for things, because there is a true talent crunch, but it's not a lack of people, it's a lack of people with the right skills that can actually continue joining organizations and adding value. It's less people graduating from accounting and finance that are retiring. So how do we actually leverage technologies? How do we bring those things together to make sure that we're still addressing the business needs and business concerns and adding value? And I think making sure that women continue advancing instead of hitting that ceiling is really important to filling that gap, I would say. And the more people feel like they have the support and are enabled and know that they can have support for that balance, the better we're going to be to solve that talent crunch.
So I'm curious, for women that are maybe thinking, how do I become aware of these skills or develop my skills or become aware of these characteristics of the differences in workforce based on gender, how mentorship might fill a role in that. I'll open that up to you, Susan, if you have comments on, I know you've been both a mentor and have had mentors. Any thoughts on how that can help women in developing their career?
Yeah. I'll tell one quick story on that. Just listening to Pam talk about the balance of having kids, I was having a conversation with one of my directs a few years ago, and she had the opposite problem. She was somebody who had chosen not to have children, and she felt that there was more pressure on her to spend more hours in front of the computer or at meetings or traveling because she didn't have kids. And so she was perceived as this workhorse that was just able to take on everything, and how unfair that was. And I can see Pam's nodding. This is obviously a common conversation that we have across all spectrums of women. And I think that's it's all about perspective, to go back to the beginning and about listening to everybody's point of view here. I've been lucky enough to have wonderful mentors in my life, and I've been really proud to be a mentor to a lot of different women. And those kinds of conversations, being brave enough to just say it out loud, opens the door. And like you said, Andy, it opens your mind up to a different perspective you haven't thought of before. And I think the most important guideline that I've ever given and received is just don't fall into the trap of putting yourself last. This is something that women across the world do, is, like Pam said, if you're juggling 15 different things, your own needs almost always come last as a woman, and we shouldn't do that to ourselves. So my guidance there on the mentorship piece, and the best guidance I ever got, is don't put yourself last. Make sure you're doing the things that you know are important, that bring you energy in your world, whether that's going for a run or it's playing the violin or whatever it is for you that doesn't involve other people at all.
I completely agree with you. The reason I'm nodding is I had a staff one time, and she didn't even directly report to me, but she really struggled because her boss always expected her to stay late, and she was younger. And I told her, I was like, just tell him you have therapy. Like, he can't say no to you leaving for therapy at a reasonable time. And I'll never forget her like looking at me and being like, oh yeah, because she wanted to go to yoga. So it was like, your yoga is your personal therapy, and it's at 7:00. Of course you can leave at 6:00 to go to yoga. Just tell him you have therapy tonight, and he's not going to, your boss is not going to question you. And I will not forget it, but she's worked for me 3 other times since. And just her feeling like she had somebody on her side was what supported her continuing her career, because she felt like she felt trapped because she didn't have kids.
Yeah.
I'd like to shift gears just slightly onto just diversity in general in finance. So Pam, I'm just curious about your thoughts on how diversity in finance, how can this impact business performance?
Yeah, diversity to me means a lot of different things. It doesn't mean only adding women or only adding different types of ethnicities or anything like that to your team. When I joined OneStream, my entire team was women. So to me, when I looked around, I actually talked to HR and I was like, once you're talking about diversity metrics, for me, it's actually adding other viewpoints, other skill sets, other men to the team or other genders as well. So to me, diversity in each team has to be viewed differently, because you want a team of not clones. You want people who can add perspective, who can help train and develop each other, that make each other better and stronger as they grow in their careers and challenge each other to continue adding more and more value to themselves and to the company that they're working for. So that's been one of the things that I've really focused on at OneStream, is that when we're bringing on new talent, you don't always want to go to the same talent pool. You don't always want to go to the same career path. Everybody doesn't have to come up through one avenue. You want a breadth of experience, because those experiences are what going to raise the bar and continue advancing the team together to learn from each other.
It takes me back. I once had a mentor tell me, did consulting throughout my life, so I constantly had teams changing. And when I was trying to staff a certain open position, they said probably the worst person you could put on a role is someone that thinks and acts and behaves exactly like I do. Because you completely eliminate any alternative, different points of view and thinking.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get into almost storytelling mode here. I'm sure you both have stories within your own career where being a woman was limiting in some way. And so I'd like to have you think about that and any advice you might provide to a woman that's in a similar situation or has maybe similar limiting factors that are impacting their career.
I can start if you'd like. When I was at my last company, it was a women-owned business. We were in the manufacturing space, and I always thought it was going to be great working for a female CEO and having a female boss. But I'd had multiple female bosses amongst my career, but never a woman-owned business. So I was super excited to go through that. I was with the company for quite a while. We had a lot of stressful situations. We went through restructuring, we went through a financing, and ultimately went through a bankruptcy. And I was in her very tight circle of trust. But I realized very quickly she really liked surrounding herself by men. She felt more comfortable with that strength around her. And so when it came to making a decision with taking a promotional opportunity there or joining OneStream, it was, hey, you can take the CFO position. It's there for you type of conversation. At that time, I knew that wasn't a role that I wanted to be in, because I felt like I wasn't going to be able to be successful in that role, because I didn't fit the mold of what she wanted ultimately, even though she trusted me to be that seat in the boardroom, to have that strength or whatever. No matter what I do, I think she would always want to have that man behind her, helping her ultimately. When I saw who she felt passionate about, it usually wasn't the women in the leadership. She actually felt stronger about the men in the leadership because they acted differently towards her. They definitely served to her where women weren't going to serve to her. If so, it was an interesting thought process for me to go through and make the decision. I wanted to join a company that really supported different diversity, who really were advancing people and were innovative. And that's ultimately why I joined OneStream. I've been part of the OneStream community for over 10 years, from being a customer and then ultimately joining here as the controller and growing the whole finance organization. But to me, that was really a decision point. It was a point in my career that I needed to decide, what did I want to do? Was it the title and the role? And it was going to be a struggle the whole time and I'd be frustrated? Or was it taking a different opportunity that might not have been like a promotional seat, but where I could be successful and be able to spread my wings? And that's ultimately why I made that decision.
Clearly, that's just coming through the way you present your career at OneStream. You made the right decision. You went with your instincts. So
I think so too.
Kudos to you. So I'm curious, you're both parents, and that's family is an important part of your lives. That comes through in just this conversation. I would like to have you both touch on, if you would, just how you've balanced your career with being a parent.
I'll go first on this one. This is one where I'll just flat out admit I do not do this well. I struggle here, and it's hard to even hear myself say that out loud. I want to say I'm good at it all. Of course, I can balance everything, and that's just not true for me. I tend to drop the parenting side and pick up the work side more than I would like. And I'll talk in a second about why that is meaningful, but I want to set the table to say I'm lucky enough to have a working spouse who is also a really good partner to me. And he and I years ago had a long conversation about ownership of the standard domestic activities in the house. And he agreed after this conversation to pick up, in my mind, the biggest time sucks. And those are school and activities, doctors, and dinner. And since then, I have very rarely touched any of those things. For example, the entire time my son was in middle school, I never set foot inside of his school. I wouldn't even know how to get into the door, where to go to the office, never talked to a teacher, don't know my kids' doctors' names to that level. And I feel a lot of guilt about that. It's important for the balance, but I just struggle with, should I be there and do I want to be there? And I don't really want to go see the school principal anytime. Do I want to be there for their plays or their activities, and I'm traveling and I'm missing a graduation or whatever it is? And that's so hard to have that struggle of my own guilt. But if I stop and inverse that, they have a parent who is attending those things with them. Why does it matter which one it is? They are lucky enough to have a dual parent household and have a parent who participates and supports them in that life. And if it was the other way around, would a man have that same guilt? I don't know, maybe. My husband probably would, but I have to work on this. It's really hard for me to let go of my own guilt because I want to be there for some of those things. Not all of them, but some of them. But my advice to people who are struggling with the same issue that I am is to have the conversation. I think a lot of us just pick up the pieces and assume that it's something that everybody's going to take part of. But if you have the conversation and you don't set expectations, then you're just setting yourself up for difficulty and fights. But if you're a single parent, that's harder. I know that. I feel for anyone who's a single parent, and I don't know what that's, but I would say use your community if you can. Don't just assume that it has to be a spouse. Other people, your friends, your colleagues can help with those kinds of things, and you got to ask.
Yeah, I completely agree. It definitely takes a village. My husband is also, he's a finance CFO as well. So we have very similar careers. He started his career at PwC and I started my career at Ernst & Young. And then we've just continued moving along in our career paths. But one of the first CFOs I directly worked for said to me when I was trying to decide whether to go to the Christmas party or whether to attend the board meeting, he said to me, you'll never remember missing the board meeting. You will remember missing the Christmas party. Go to the Christmas party. The team's got it. You've built a good team to support you. Go ahead. And ever since that, I've really thought about whenever I'm missing something, if I really could have somebody else step in on the work. It takes a village at work. It takes a village at home. So there's certain things that maybe are less impactful, like being part of the Teachers Appreciation Week, where there are parents who are in the school helping with all that stuff. Like those are not things that I feel like I have to put down because my child won't know that I missed those things. But do I feel like parent guilt? For sure, because there's a lot of parents who spend a lot of time to make the school a great place for the students. And that's not something that I have the ability to do. But everybody's juggling that. So there's always a guilt process. And I would add to what you said, Susan, is sometimes when you're at the event, because of things going on at work, you're not actually there. You're physically, but you're not mentally engaged. And I think my kids will catch me in that, because I try my best to be at all the things that I can be at. But you're always connected. You always have your phone with you. You always have your email. So if there are things going on, it's easy to be distracted because you have a sense of responsibility, a sense of accountability as well in both. So you're trying to juggle those things, and it's always a challenge, and it's never perfect. So I think there's no person that does it perfectly. I'd be shocked if somebody ever said they do and they felt like they were perfect and they're juggling these things. To me, it's really doing the best you can and hoping that you're making the right decisions in that moment. And we're always making mistakes, and that's okay as a parent. It's our first time going through it. It's not like there's a handbook that has a perfect process for balancing these things, and you just have to evaluate everything as it comes, one day at a time.
So I'm curious, Pam, shift us back to the Women in Finance community and the initiative the OneStream started that you've been a part of. How has that positively impacted its members and those that have participated? Did you have any stories or anecdotes or examples you could share with us?
Yeah, I think just getting more comfortable having a conversation around it. I can think through almost all of the panelists we've ever had join us and the stories that they've been able to share. And sometimes it took starting this conversation in a webinar or a prep or a dry run to even get them comfortable to bring up the story, because they hit it deep down. And so I think even just starting those conversations, I can think through panelists that talk to us a little bit about, even college. I was in a classroom, and it was mostly female classroom, and the professor walked in because it was an advanced statistics class and said, "Oh, I must be in the wrong room," because it was full of women. And then she chased him down the hall and realized, oh no, that must be the classroom, but that's weird. Why would there be all women in my advanced statistics class? So just a lot of stories. She's like, I've never told anybody that story, but it's real. It resonates with a lot of people. And so that's actually one of the things that I'm super proud of, is that's something that I think we're breaking through. Women are guarded for the most part. We don't share stories a lot about things that have happened. And I think just starting that conversation is really what I'm hopeful that these webinars do, that these in-person events do, and this podcast does. Just, it's okay to have the conversation. There's never going to be a perfect answer. There's no perfect roadmap. Every career is not going to look the same. You don't have to go through and work your entire path through. We've had people join us that have taken breaks in their career to raise their kids and come back to the workforce and talk about that. We've had people join us that never had kids and talked a lot about what Susan said, like how there was always a stigma with them in their career, like, why don't you have to leave for your kids? Don't you have to leave for your kids? But never had the conversation about it. And one of the CFOs that joined us was talking about how she really started a finance, and it's a Fortune 100 company, and she started this finance initiative after our webinar to try to help really continue advancing the messaging within her own company, because it was a real thing for her. It really resonated with her of the challenges she's experienced in her career to get to the CFO seat.
Love that the community is spawning off other many communities. That's how change happens. It's taking action, and it must be wonderful to see those results.
Yeah.
Shift gears to talk a little bit about advice you might have for young women aspiring to build their careers in finance. And maybe, Susan, we could start with you on this question. Any advice you could provide?
Yeah. I'll underscore some of the topics that we've already discussed here today, because I think that there's several common threads, and one is lean on others. The reason the Women in Finance initiative that Pam and others have created at OneStream is successful is because it provides the structure to be able to lean on others and feel like we are part of a community. Humans are social animals, forget men and women. It's important to feel like there are others out there. And I love what you just said, Pam, about being able to tell a story that you haven't told before, that you've buried or that you didn't feel comfortable telling. it's really important and it's really hard to do. There are several of my own stories and several of my close colleagues and friends and clients and direct report stories that I know only come up once people feel deeply comfortable. And what better way to do it than to join or be a part of something like what you're trying to create, or this podcast, or just having a group of people that you raise the questions to. I think another piece of this that's a little bit of a twist, and we haven't talked much about this, is find somebody that you admire and ask them how they got to where they are. We often ask about the challenges and the tough parts of people's lives, but it's not often that we look at somebody that we really look up to or admire, man, woman, whoever they are, and say, wow, I really respect you. How did you get to here? What inspires you? How did you get to where you are in life? To help build your own story. And I think the last thing is tell folks when you need help. Don't ask the question, tell them. Go back to my question versus statement. I need help with XYZ, because doing it yourself isn't always the answer there. That's the advice I'd give.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that nobody can paint your career path for you. So always continue challenging yourself and making sure like you're in the right seat at the right time. It's never going to be the same for anybody. Yeah, I can think back to my career at Ernst & Young when I was making the decision to leave. The partner came to me like, you're on the partner path. Why would you want to leave? And I sat in the room in the office with him and I said, I appreciate that, but you don't define my career and my success. I know that is going to come from me, and I'm going to define my career and success. And once you go through that process, there's never been a path I've decided I want to do. I'm going to do this, then that. It's always been thinking through the here, the now, and what's my next step to make sure that I'm getting the right balance, the right experience at that point in time. And sometimes maybe you're in a bad seat and you're not happy, but you have to learn from being in that seat. Things you like, things you don't like, things that you can bring onto your next role. Bad managers can add as much value to your career as good managers. Learning from things not to do. So I would say don't run away from hard things and continue just moving forward one step at a time. And don't ever give yourself a timeline to be successful. Time isn't a measure of success. You being happy and being able to contribute and achieving whatever is that goal that you want to do, that's success, not like a timeline of advancement.
I love that timeline piece. That's really significant. I hadn't heard that one before.
All right. So Pam, as we start to close this episode out, I'm just curious about the Women in Finance Initiative at OneStream. What are some of the future goals that you have for the program, that OneStream has, and how do you plan to help guide and direct and achieve those goals?
Yeah, we have a lot of great things coming out. We're excited to announce a lot of very cool things that OneStream is going to be working on this next year at Splash. So I don't want to be a spoiler of that, but we're just super excited to kind of share some really cool announcements in the next couple weeks. So those are going to be some things that are going to be groundbreaking for us and to continue investing in women in finance and women in general. So we're really excited to be going to that space for us. But I would say, like, for us, it's going to continue being, how do we advance the career of women, and how do we actually bring that into what OneStream can do and add value to that? So there's innovation. We're always innovating. We're always thinking about the next step in our process in our career. And I think that's continuously what we're doing in the Women in Finance. We're always innovating. We're trying to think of the next step. How do we actually raise the bar? How do we add more content and value to what we can bring to the conversation and bring the network together? So those are a couple of things that we're going to be bringing up and raising the bar on this next year.
Looking forward to the announcements. I'm curious now. And I imagine that will be part of the Women in Finance luncheon, which is Splash Nashville. It's on Thursday afternoon this year. I think we mentioned up front, No Advisory is a sponsor of that. So please check that out. And as we wrap up, maybe Susan, you get any closing comments and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, we are really excited to sponsor this Women in Finance lunch panel at Splash. So I love what we talked about today about the open dialogue. And you, like Andy said, you have my curiosity piqued here, Pam, about the innovation piece in particular. Now I'm just going to be listening with all the third ear here. We are excited to be main stage this year. This is different for us to be main stage instead of just one of many of the sessions available. And for us at Nova, we're really excited and proud to be the sponsors. And as far as contact, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thanks, Susan. And Pam, same question to you, closing thoughts, and how can people reach out and get in touch?
Yeah, always reach out. You can always find us on LinkedIn or reach out directly through OneStream. Everybody at OneStream knows how to get a hold of me, but always available on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out. We have a lot of exciting things, and thank you to Nova Advisory for sponsoring this. The session is going to be a big session this year, and we couldn't be happier to have you guys helping us through the process and being our sponsor.
We're just happy to be a part of the initiative and supporting a fantastic program that you've kicked off. And thank you so much, Pam and Susan, for joining today's episode. And I think this is one of my favorites, probably my most eye-opening after, I think, episode 61 here publishes. We'll see you all here in Splash Nashville here in a couple weeks.
Yep. See you soon.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining today's episode of CPM Customer Success. And a reminder, check out the CPM Customer Success weekly email newsletter to stay informed of the latest CPM Customer Success episodes and OneStream news. You can check that out at Nova Advisory's website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success newsletter today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of CPM Customer Success.